Parents picked brother as CEO after I grew their small shop into national brand and landed $9 million in sales. The weight of those words pressed against my chest like a stone, heavy and unyielding. I stood in the dimly lit conference room of our family's headquarters, staring at the polished mahogany table that had witnessed countless business decisions over the past decade. The air smelled faintly of leather and ambition, a combination that had become as familiar to me as my own reflection. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city skyline stretched endlessly, mirroring the empire I had built from nothing but a small corner shop. It was supposed to be a celebration. $9 million in annual revenue wasn't just a number. It represented sleepless nights, strategic gambles, and sacrifices that had carved deep grooves into my soul. Every product launch, every marketing campaign, every distribution deal, they all bore my fingerprints. I could still remember the first time I'd walked into that tiny storefront, its shelves barely stocked, its future uncertain. My parents had handed me the keys with hopeful eyes and trembling hands, trusting me to transform their modest family business into something sustainable. And transform it I did. Through sheer force of will and an almost obsessive dedication to excellence, I turned that little shop into a national brand. I remembered the first major retail chain that agreed to carry our products, how I'd cried in the parking lot after the meeting, overwhelmed by the validation of years of hard work. The late nights spent perfecting packaging designs, the endless pitches to skeptical investors, the careful cultivation of relationships with suppliers, each moment had been a brick in the foundation of what we'd become. But now, as I stared at the empty chair at the head of the table where I should have been sitting, none of that seemed to matter. My parents' decision echoed in my mind, each word a dagger to my heart. Your brother has the natural leadership qualities, they'd said. He'll take the company to new heights. The irony burned like acid in my throat. It was my vision, my strategies, my relentless drive that had brought us to this point. Yet somehow, in their eyes, it wasn't enough to prove my capability. I thought about all the times I'd put family before personal ambition. When my father had fallen ill, I'd stepped away from crucial negotiations to manage the business alone for months. During market crises, I'd mortgaged my own apartment to keep cash flow stable. I'd sacrificed vacations, relationships, even my health, all for the sake of this company, this family legacy. And now, when success was finally within our grasp, they chose someone else to lead it forward. The boardroom door creaked open, snapping me out of my thoughts. My brother Ethan walked in, his suit perfectly tailored, his confident stride filling the space with an air of entitlement. He flashed his trademark charming smile, the same one that had always made him the favorite child. Our parents had always seen him as the golden boy, the natural-born leader, despite his complete lack of experience in running a business. His background in tech startups was impressive on paper, but it couldn't compare to the blood, sweat, and tears I'd poured into this company. "Hey sis," he said, dropping into the chair beside me. "Big day, huh? Mom and Dad are thrilled about the changes ahead." His voice carried that casual confidence that had always grated on my nerves. He hadn't earned this position through merit or achievement, it had been handed to him on a silver platter, wrapped in family favoritism. I forced a smile, though it felt like cracking glass. "Congratulations, Ethan. I'm sure you'll do great things with the company." The words tasted bitter, each syllable scraping against my pride. Inside, a storm raged, anger at my parents' blindness, frustration at being overlooked, and a deep-seated fear that everything I'd built might crumble under less experienced hands. As Ethan began outlining his plans for restructuring the company, I found myself tuning out, memories flooding back instead. I recalled the early days when our parents' shop was struggling to stay afloat. How I'd worked double shifts at a cafe while developing our first product line. The countless rejections from distributors who didn't believe in our vision. The moment when our first major order came in, 500 units to a national chain, and how I danced around the warehouse with the packing team, tears streaming down our faces. Those victories had meant everything to me. They weren't just business milestones, they were personal triumphs that proved my worth. But now, sitting here watching my brother sketch out grand ideas that lacked the nuance of real-world experience, I felt like a ghost haunting my own creation. The company I'd nurtured from infancy was being handed over to someone who hadn't shared in its struggles, who hadn't bled for its success. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a text from our mother, "We're so proud of both of you. This is the fresh start the company needs." Fresh start. The words hit like a punch to the gut. Didn't they see what I'd already achieved? Wasn't $9 million in sales proof enough of my capabilities? Or was there something deeper at play, some fundamental flaw in me that they couldn't see past? The meeting continued around me, voices discussing budgets and projections, but I felt detached, like I was watching someone else's life unfold. I thought about all the employees who had grown with the company, who had trusted my leadership and vision. What would they think when they learned of this change? Would they question my abilities? Lose faith in the direction we'd been heading? Ethan's voice broke through my thoughts again. I want to shake things up, he was saying. Maybe pivot toward e-commerce exclusively. Brick and mortar is dying anyway. My stomach churned. He spoke with such certainty, yet he hadn't lived through the painstaking process of building relationships with physical retailers. He didn't understand the value of having products on actual shelves, of customers being able to touch and feel what we created. I wanted to speak up, to defend the strategy that had brought us success. But something held me back, perhaps the fear of seeming petty, or maybe the exhaustion of fighting battles that never seemed to end. Instead, I nodded along, my mask of professionalism firmly in place while inside, a part of me was breaking apart. As the meeting drew to a close, I gathered my papers with mechanical precision. Ethan clapped me on the shoulder. "Don't worry, sis. We'll make this work together." His words were meant to be reassuring, but they only deepened the ache in my chest. Together. As if my role hadn't fundamentally changed overnight. As if I hadn't been demoted from leader to subordinate in my own creation. Walking back to my office, I passed rows of employees who offered congratulatory smiles and thumbs-up signs. They thought I was part of this decision, that I supported it. How could I explain that I felt like a stranger in my own company? That the dreams I'd nurtured for years were being redirected by hands that hadn't earned the right to hold them? In my office, I closed the door and sank into my chair. The walls were covered with awards and recognition plaques, tangible proof of what I'd accomplished. But now they felt like hollow trophies, meaningless in the face of my parents' decision. I picked up a framed photograph of our original shop, taken on the day I'd taken over. The worn sign, the faded awning, the single cash register, it had been so small then, so insignificant. Yet it had contained infinite possibilities, boundless potential waiting to be unleashed. Tears blurred my vision as I traced the edge of the frame. All those years of proving myself, of showing that I was capable, that I could lead, had they meant nothing? Was my gender, my quiet determination, my methodical approach somehow less valuable than my brother's charisma and charm? The questions swirled in my mind, each one more painful than the last. Through the window, I watched the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Another day was ending, and with it, perhaps an era of my life. The company I'd built, the legacy I'd created, would any of it truly be mine anymore? Or was I destined to watch from the sidelines as someone else took credit for my achievements? The intercom buzzed, my assistant reminding me of tomorrow's schedule. I wiped my eyes and straightened my posture. Whatever happened next, I knew one thing for certain, I wouldn't go down without a fight. Not after everything I'd sacrificed, everything I'd achieved. This company was my heart and soul, and no amount of family politics would change that fact. As I prepared to leave for the day, I caught sight of myself in the mirror. The woman staring back looked tired but determined. Her eyes held the fire of someone who refused to be diminished, who understood that true strength came not from titles or positions, but from the unwavering belief in one's own worth. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I would face them with the same resilience that had brought me this far. The city lights sparkled outside my window, each one representing a dream, a hope, a possibility. Somewhere in that vast expanse, my future waited, uncertain perhaps, but still full of potential. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and stepped into the elevator. The doors closed behind me, sealing off the past and opening toward whatever came next. The elevator descended, each floor bringing me closer to the lobby and further from the life I had known. As the doors opened, I stepped into the bustling energy of the building's main entrance. Employees were leaving for the day, their faces reflecting the satisfaction of another successful close to business hours. They nodded at me, some offering smiles or waves, gestures that used to fill me with pride but now felt like tiny daggers reminding me of what I was losing. I walked through the revolving doors and into the cool evening air. The city buzzed around me, indifferent to my turmoil. Streetlights flickered on, casting long shadows across the pavement as people hurried home, their lives moving forward while mine seemed stuck in this moment of betrayal. My car waited in the parking garage, but instead of heading there, I found myself drawn toward the small park across the street, the same place where I used to sit during lunch breaks when the weight of leadership became too heavy. The bench I favored was empty, so I sank onto it, letting the familiar creak of wood beneath me ground me in reality. Across the pond, ducks paddled lazily, their movements unhurried and purposeful. A young girl threw breadcrumbs into the water, her laughter ringing out like wind chimes in the gentle breeze. Watching her, I thought about how simple life had been before ambition and expectation tangled themselves around my heart. My phone vibrated again, another message from Mom. "We know you'll support Ethan. Family comes first. Family comes first." The phrase echoed in my mind, twisting painfully against everything I believed we stood for. Hadn't I always put family first? Hadn't I sacrificed my own dreams, my own happiness, for the sake of theirs? And yet here I was, being asked to step aside, to watch someone else take credit for years of relentless work. A memory surfaced unbidden, one of those rare moments when Dad had pulled me aside after a particularly tough week. His hands had been rough from decades of manual labor, his voice thick with emotion. "You're stronger than you think," he'd said. "Stronger than any man I know." Back then, those words had meant everything. They'd fueled me through sleepless nights and crushing setbacks. But now they felt hollow, like an old promise broken without explanation. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, but I blinked them away. Crying wouldn't change anything. It never had. What I needed was clarity, a way to navigate this new reality without losing myself in the process. I pulled out my notebook, the same one I'd carried since the early days of running the company. Its pages were filled with scribbles, sketches, and ideas that had shaped our journey. Flipping to a blank page, I began writing. What do I want? To be recognized for my contributions. To protect the legacy I've built. To maintain control over decisions that affect the company's future. What can I do? Stay involved in key projects. Build alliances within the team. Prove my value beyond doubt. What must I accept? That Ethan is now CEO. That my parents made their choice. That fighting openly might damage relationships irreparably. Each bullet point felt like a weight lifting slightly off my chest. Writing it down gave form to the chaos swirling inside me, transforming abstract fears into concrete challenges I could address. For the first time since hearing the news, I allowed myself to breathe deeply, feeling the tension ease just enough to think clearly. But clarity brought its own kind of pain. Acceptance didn't mean agreement. Knowing what I wanted didn't guarantee I'd get it. And proving my worth would require more than just hard work. It would demand patience, strategy, and perhaps even humility I wasn't sure I possessed. As I sat there, lost in thought, a shadow fell over me. Looking up, I saw Sarah, one of our longest-serving employees, standing awkwardly beside the bench. She held 2 cups of coffee, steam curling into the night air. "Mind if I join you?" she asked softly. "Of course not," I replied, scooting over to make room. Sarah had been with us since the beginning, back when the company was still operating out of the original shop. She knew every product line, every customer story, every late-night brainstorming session. If anyone understood what this company meant to me, it was her. She handed me a cup and sat down, sipping hers slowly before speaking. "I heard about the changes," she said finally, her tone careful. "Are you okay?" The question caught me off guard. Everyone else had been tiptoeing around the subject, pretending nothing was wrong. But Sarah wasn't like that. She'd always called things as she saw them, even when it made others uncomfortable. That honesty was part of why I trusted her so much. "I don't know," I admitted, staring into the dark liquid. "I feel displaced. Like everything I've worked for is slipping away." Sarah nodded, her expression thoughtful. "It's not fair," she said simply. "You built this company. You turned it into something incredible. No one can deny that." Her words warmed me, but they also stung. Because if no one could deny it, then why had my parents? Why had they looked past all my achievements and chosen Ethan instead? "I keep wondering if I did something wrong," I confessed, my voice barely above a whisper. "If maybe I wasn't assertive enough, or charismatic enough, or—" "Stop," Sarah interrupted firmly. "You're perfect for this job. Anyone who says otherwise doesn't understand what leadership really means. You lead by example, by dedication, by caring about every single detail. Not everyone sees that, but those of us who matter do. Her conviction startled me. In all these years, I'd never realized how much my team valued my approach. I'd assumed they preferred bold, flashy leaders, the kind Ethan naturally was. But maybe that wasn't true. Maybe there was strength in quiet determination, in consistency, in showing up day after day and doing the work. Still, admiration from colleagues couldn't change the fact that Ethan was now in charge. He'd already started making plans to pivot the company in directions I wasn't sure were wise. His enthusiasm was infectious, yes, but it lacked the depth of experience that came from years of trial and error. "What are you going to do?" Sarah asked, breaking the silence. I hesitated, unsure how to answer. Part of me wanted to fight, to demand recognition, to prove once and for all that I deserved to lead. But another part, the pragmatic part, knew that outright rebellion would only hurt the company. My parents had made their decision, and challenging it publicly would create divisions I wasn't prepared to face. "I think I need to find a middle ground," I said slowly. "Stay involved, support Ethan where I can, but also make sure my voice is heard. If I can show him, and everyone else, that my contributions are still vital, maybe I can carve out a role that works." Sarah smiled faintly. "That sounds like you. Always finding solutions, even when it hurts." We sat there for a while longer, talking about everything and nothing. She shared stories from the warehouse floor, little victories and challenges that reminded me why I loved this company so much. By the time we parted ways, I felt lighter, as though sharing my burden had lessened its weight. Driving home, I replayed our conversation in my mind. Sarah's faith in me was a lifeline, a reminder that not everyone saw me as expendable. But faith alone wouldn't be enough. If I wanted to reclaim my place in this company, I'd need to act strategically, carefully choosing my battles and leveraging my strengths. The next morning, I arrived at the office early, determined to start fresh. Ethan was already there, reviewing reports in the conference room. When he saw me, he waved me over, his usual charm masking whatever uncertainty he might have felt about taking over. "Morning, sis," he greeted me. "Got a minute?" I nodded, joining him at the table. The stack of papers in front of him looked daunting: financial projections, market analyses, operational reports. Things I'd handled effortlessly for years, but which were likely overwhelming to him. "I've been thinking about restructuring the marketing department," he began, launching into a detailed plan that sounded impressive on the surface but ignored several key factors. I listened patiently, nodding at appropriate intervals, waiting for my chance to interject. "That's a great idea," I said when he paused. "But have you considered the impact on our existing partnerships? Some of those relationships took years to build, and shifting focus too quickly could jeopardize them." Ethan frowned, clearly surprised by my input. "I hadn't thought of that," he admitted. "What do you suggest?" For the next hour, we worked together, refining his plan to incorporate the nuances he'd overlooked. It was a small victory, but it proved something important. Despite the title change, my expertise was still valuable. If I played my cards right, I could remain an integral part of the company's success. Over the following weeks, I adopted a similar strategy. Whenever Ethan proposed a major change, I offered constructive feedback, framing it as collaboration rather than criticism. Slowly but surely, he began relying on me more, trusting my judgment in areas where his experience fell short. Our dynamic shifted, becoming less adversarial and more complementary. But progress came at a cost. Each compromise I made felt like another piece of my identity slipping away. Late at night, lying awake in bed, I wrestled with doubts and fears. Was I selling myself short? Allowing others to define my worth? Or was this simply the price of staying relevant in a world that refused to see me as I truly was? One evening, unable to sleep, I wandered into the living room and flipped through an old photo album. Pictures of the original shop stared back at me, the cramped aisles, the handwritten signs, the customers who had become friends over time. In one photo, I stood behind the counter, smiling proudly as I rang up a sale. My parents were beside me, their arms around my shoulders, their faces glowing with pride. Seeing that image hit me harder than I expected. Back then, they'd believed in me. They'd trusted me to carry their dream forward. So what had changed? Why did they suddenly doubt my ability to lead? The realization struck me like lightning. It wasn't about doubt. It was about fear. Fear that I'd grown too independent, too strong-willed, too capable of standing on my own. By promoting Ethan, they weren't undermining me, they were trying to keep me close, to ensure I remained part of the family fold. Understanding their motives didn't erase the hurt, but it softened the edges. For the first time, I saw my parents' decision not as a rejection but as a misguided attempt to preserve unity. They loved me, in their flawed, imperfect way. And maybe, just maybe, that love could be the bridge I needed to rebuild our relationship. The next day, I called a family meeting. Sitting around the dining table where countless meals and arguments had taken place, I looked at my parents and Ethan, seeing not adversaries but people who mattered deeply to me. "I need to say something," I began, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside. "I'm hurt. I won't pretend otherwise. But I also understand why you made this decision. You were trying to protect what we have, to keep us together. And I respect that." Mom reached across the table, taking my hand in hers. Her eyes glistened with tears. "We never meant to hurt you," she whispered. We thought Ethan could bring something different to the table." "I know," I said gently. "And he does. He has ideas and energy that complement mine. But I need you to trust me too. To believe that I'm still capable of leading, even if it's not in the traditional sense." Dad cleared his throat, his weathered face lined with regret. "You've always been the rock of this family," he said gruffly. "Maybe we forgot that for a while. But we see it now. We see you." Those words, simple yet profound, broke something open inside me. All the anger, the frustration, the insecurity melted away, leaving only gratitude. Gratitude for a family that, despite its flaws, still cared enough to try. From that moment on, things began to shift. Ethan and I found a rhythm, blending his vision with my experience to steer the company toward new heights. My parents, though hesitant at first, gradually came to rely on my counsel again, recognizing the unique perspective I brought to the table. And I, in turn, learned to let go of the need for validation, finding strength in the knowledge that my worth wasn't defined by a title. But the journey wasn't over. Challenges lay ahead, both personal and professional. There would be moments of doubt, times when old wounds resurfaced and tested our fragile peace. Yet amidst it all, I held on to one truth. I had built something extraordinary, not just in terms of business but in terms of resilience, courage, and love. As I stood on the balcony of my office one evening, watching the city lights twinkle below, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The road ahead was uncertain, yes, but it was mine to walk. Whatever happened next, I knew I would face it with the same determination that had brought me this far. And perhaps, just perhaps, that was enough.